We recently had the privilege of interviewing for almost an hour one of the greatest patriots in the political sphere in the United States of America. His name, Roy Moore, the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. You are in for an education and inspiration. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
In today's part of the interview with Judge Moore, and I'm so thankful he took the time to do it, we're going to look at the role of God in government. We're going to look at how Christians will end up going to jail because of this godless Supreme Court decision legalizing so-called homosexual marriage. And we're going to talk about impeachment. I hope that you are challenged and blessed by what you hear. Mr. Chief Justice, thank you so much for giving us your time. It really is an honor to visit with His Honor.
Well, thank you.
What exactly are you right now asking people to do and why?
Well, right now we're not asking anybody to do anything. We're engaged in a conflict with the federal court, and the Supreme Court of the United States has just issued a horrendous opinion that I think contradicts the Constitution. So we're fighting with briefs, and we're fighting and writing and speaking and letting people know what this is really about.
Justice Scalia, in his dissent, and he's no dummy, he uses words with incredible precision. He called this a judicial pooch.
Yeah. Yes, basically, just like he refers that to the Nazi Germany time period, and basically it's a seizure of power by the judiciary over and above the Constitution ever imagined. In fact, this is really adverse to our religious liberty. It's adverse to the Constitution and has no basis in the Constitution. One of my favorite quotes in there was what Justice Roberts said when he said that if you're on the other side, that you may have a right to celebrate and you may have a right to do this or that, but don't celebrate the Constitution because it had nothing to do with it. And I think the four dissenters in this case clearly showed that the Constitution had nothing to do with it. In fact, Justice Roberts says, who do we think we are? And I think that's a good statement. Who do they think they are when 5 lawyers, and that was a reference to Justice Roberts, said 5 lawyers have closed the debate, enacted their own vision of marriage as a matter of constitutional law. And I think that sums it up.
He said something in his dissent that I felt was pretty ominous, and I'll read to you a couple of things. He said, Dred Scott's holding, the slavery decision, Dred Scott's holding was overruled on the battlefields of the Civil War. And then he went on to say those who founded...
by a constitutional amendment.
Right. And then he said, they, after all, about our founders, he said, they, after all, risked their lives and fortunes for the precious right to govern themselves, and they could not have imagined yielding this to unelected, unaccountable judges.
I think one of the things I noticed in the dissent is all 4 dissenters kept referring to 5 lawyers, or a committee of 9, talking about the whole court, but they were very disparaging as to exactly what these people on the other side had done. The majority opinion in this case certainly was an act of will, not of law. It was an act of that should have been left to the legislature. In fact, I think it was Justice Roberts cited that you'll notice there's nothing in there about the normal state authority over marriage, which they cited in 2013 in U.S. versus Windsor. And this same justice, Justice Kennedy, wrote in Windsor that these matters had historically been left to the states under the Constitution of the United States. And they were not matters for the federal government. That's exactly what they said when they overturned DOMA, the 1996 law regarding marriage between a man and a woman.
Justice Alito, as you know, I've already heard you and seen you quoting from him. He said that in so many words, that this was going to pave the way for persecution. That this new orthodoxy, people are going to end up in court from stuff that they happen in their jobs or perhaps.
He said
in
it
school.
would vilify Americans.
Yes.
Who are unwilling to assent to the new orthodoxy.
They'll whisper things, but they'll be afraid.
He said, sometimes you may be able to whisper in your homes, and that's basically what they've reduced religious liberty to. They're saying that you can teach and advocate, but you better not do anything. Well, you know what they used was a reference to the First Amendment, but they left out one word, and that's exercise.
Right.
The free exercise of religion. And when you forget that your faith is more than about just what you talk about, it's where you are. And that's what this court is really going after, what you do.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah?
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
I can see people hauled into court for civil lawsuits.
They will be.
Over businesses. I can see people going to jail for contempt of court, because if a judge says to a man, do this, and he says, I'm not doing it.
Well, it's a violation of your religious liberty. Thomas Jefferson.
Can you see people
certainly
being sued or going to jail over contempt of court?
Sure. And, back in the 1700s, people went to jail because they did not follow the faith of another church or something. The Baptists were persecuted, and
So
in
were the
Virginia,
Catholics.
and so were Catholics. But basically, that's what's going to happen in our time. Thomas Jefferson, who authored the Bill for Religious Freedom, said something that's very appropriate for this day and time. He said that to suffer or allow the civil magistrate to intrude his powers into the field of opinion and restrain the profession or propagation of principles on supposition of their ill tendency is a dangerous fallacy, which at once destroys our religious liberty, because he, talking about the civil magistrate, being judge of that opinion or that tendency, will make his own opinion the rule of judgment and approve or condemn the sentiments of others only as they square with or differ from his own, that it is time enough for the rightful purposes of civil government for its officers to interfere when principles break out into overt acts against peace and good order. Now, certainly if you apply that to this case, the principles of peace and good order have not been breaking out when you're talking about marriages between a man and a woman. That's existed for centuries, even thousands of years.
Right.
And that's before
Even
the
the
United States Constitution
Even the
began.
pagan Greeks and the
That's
pagan
right.
Romans who had
And
homosexuality and had pedophilia, they did not stoop to this.
Yeah, to say that it's time enough for the rightful purposes of civil government when principles break out and overt acts against peace and good order. There's been no breakout peace and good order by marriage between a man and woman. And it also says that the magistrate would set himself up to make his opinion the rule of judgment and approve or condemn the sentiments of others only as they square with or differ from his own.
Alito said, basically what this, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, basically what this court has said is, we're going to do what we want on any matter until somebody in the political or social sphere has the guts, the backbone to stand up and push back.
If we don't stand up now, we won't be able to stand up, because what this court has done in this case is basically remove religious liberty by mandating that people who disagree with same-sex marriage must issue licenses,
Oh, right. You're gonna,
must provide flowers. Now, they didn't say that, but they
of course,
indicated,
right.
and the federal courts have been mandating this across the country.
Yep.
We had in Washington a lady with a flower shop
Yep.
that didn't want to display flowers for
Didn't want to sell
same-sex
flowers.
wedding. And she was sued.
Yes.
We have a bakery, and we have
The pizza parlor was...
yeah, the pizza parlor, and a SEAL chaplain that lost his job because he counseled soldiers or sailors under him
to not go
about
into that
homosexuality
lifestyle.
lifestyle. Yes, and it's just it's a persecution that's just beginning. It's going to touch the American people when you're forced to accept evil, something that historically did not exist, same-sex marriage, and to condone sodomy, which this same Justice Kennedy, ruled okay in 2003.
Right.
Then it's against their faith, and it's naturally going to be hard to take.
Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. I'm going to come back to something that I alluded to earlier. I could be wrong, and you could say if you think I'm wrong, but when I read the 4 dissents, with the exception of Thomas, his allusion was a little lighter, but all 3 of the others made allusions or alluded to the possibility for violence. They kept referring to the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, that people fought for no taxation without representation. Scalia said that. He said, look, these people fought for no taxation without representation, but this is more important, no social engineering without representation. Do you think, and this is conjecture on my part, but do you think that this decision is going to lead to things that we don't even want to think about?
Well, I can't predict the future. I don't know. I do know that Justice Thomas said that numerous amici, or those that submit briefs, have cautioned the court that its decision here will have unavoidable and wide-range implications for religious liberty. It appears all but inevitable that the two will come into conflict. The majority appears unmoved by that inevitability. In other words, I don't think the court cares what happens. The court has just issued an order, and you're referring to Dred Scott, and that was the ruling in 1857 where the Supreme Court said that black people were property.
Right.
And I think Justice Roberts said that was overcome on the battlefields of the Civil War and by a constitutional amendment.
With a gun to the head of the Confederate States.
What he was saying is that it took that much to overturn that decision. Yep. I hope we don't have a war. I hope we don't have conflicts. But we definitely need to recognize that same-sex marriage is something that has not existed at a state level or government level.
There's so many things I want to touch on, but I am of the opinion that if Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Patrick Henry, if they were here today,
they would be incensed.
Well, they would not only be incensed, but they started a war over taxation. I mean,
right.
This is like, we're going to make the colonies into Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't think so. I don't think that they would have tolerated
I think
this.
there's going to be a great backlash to it, and I think people have not seen what the consequences of this court's ruling are yet, and we'll wait and see what they do.
Justice Thomas was the only justice to refer to God.
He referred to the law of nature and the law of God.
Yeah, and the Creator, and he quoted how John Locke wove in the concepts of rights coming from our Maker. With his dissent as the exception, this was actually a godless decision.
What shocked me the most is knowing that when they went on oral argument, no one mentioned the basic reason we have marriage. It's because God ordained marriage as between a man and a woman when he created woman from the rib of Adam. And nobody even mentions that, despite the fact that the United States Supreme Court did in the 1800s. Yes, they said in Murphy versus Ramsey, they said that family springs from the union for life of one man and one woman in the holy estate of matrimony, the foundation that is most stable and noble, the best guarantee of that reverent morality which is a source of beneficent progress in all political and social improvement. They're saying basically everything that society is based on is the family, and that's started with a man and a woman.
Right.
And naturally, by nature, it starts with a man and a woman to produce children. I appreciate Justice Thomas mentioning the law of nature and the law of God. Those are legal terms in those days that we have lost any concept of.
Right.
The law of nature and the law of God. Blackstone wrote, it said, upon these two foundations, the law of nature and the law of revelation, depend all human laws. That is to say, no human laws should be suffered to contradict these. And
allowed, Old English,
that's right.
Should not be, no human law should be allowed that contradicts the laws of God.
Right.
I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. We have put together what we call an online university for you. Now that's a highfalutin way of saying that we have a pretty significant library of material, books, tapes, videos that are there for you for free. Why are we doing this? Because America is desperate for new leaders, and because this material could help you to become the leader that you and God want you to be. Check it out and enjoy it. Yep. So this is an affront to heaven. I mean, there are 4 sins that cry out to God: shedding innocent blood, Sodom and Gomorrah, sodomy, abusing orphans and widows, and slavery, withholding a man's wages, which is slavery. So slavery was settled with horrific bloodshed. Abraham Lincoln said in his second inaugural address, in so many words, that this was the judgment of God. Mm-hmm. Could it be that every drop of blood that was drawn by the master's whip is going to be shed on the field of battle? I am afraid. For the first time in my life, I'm actually afraid for the future of our country, because I feel like we've crossed some Rubicon. Something's going to happen, because there is a God in heaven. Even if the judges want to pretend he's not there, there is a God in heaven, and he hasn't rescinded his authority.
And not only are you refuting the institution God first ordained, but you're undermining the very foundation upon which all our society is built. It must be built on something. It's built on family. And when you take away the meaning of family, and that's what they've done.
Well,
they haven't
as
redefined
defined
family.
By God. That's the issue. Is that,
right.
In other words, before family was God himself. So the traditional values argument, I think, is very dangerous for Christians to take the bait, because the question is, whose tradition? I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah had a tradition. So it's that God gave us family.
Yeah.
And
well, I think that's something that they didn't recognize in this opinion. And they recognized that we were evolving as in the word marriage. They destroyed the definition of marriage. They haven't really given us one. Their reasoning would apply equally well to polygamous marriages.
Yep. One of the justices said that.
And one of the justices basically said that.
Yep.
So,
What role do you believe that God plays in the body politic, in civil government?
well, I think he had a hand in our Constitution, according to Madison, according to nearly every one of the founding fathers, that he looks over our society. He's not some God that doesn't take an interest. And, you know, when we cry out to him, and he answers our prayers. I think one of the best quotes about that was back in 1863. And it said, whereas one of the proclamations of the president back then was, whereas it is the duty of nations as well as of men to own their dependence on the overruling power of God, confess their sins and transgressions in humble sorrow, yet with assured hope that genuine repentance will lead to mercy and pardon. And it goes on and it says basically...
Those are preaching words.
It says, have we now forgotten that powerful friend? We've been the recipient of the choicest bounties of heaven. We've been preserved these many years in peace and prosperity. We've grown in numbers, wealth, and power as no other nation has ever grown, but we've forgotten God. And that was in 1863.
What role do you think the laws of God play in the body politic?
Well, the laws of God are, you know, the Ten Commandments basically are underlying our foundation of moral society. They illustrate religious freedom. Back in the dictionary in 1838, I believe it was, 1828, Webster's dictionary, it was defined as the religion and morality were the first and second tables of the law, referring to the Ten Commandments. Right. Washington said in his farewell address, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. He was referring basically to the law of God.
Right, Christian morality.
The first table being the duties we owe to God, and the second being the duties we owe to each other, our virtue or morality. Today, we've
when you say table, you mean that. Also tablet. In other words, there's two tablets to the law. The first rules, or the first laws.
They call them tables of the law.
Right.
And they also call them tablets.
Right. For the viewer who's...
Sure.
I love your use and addiction to Old English.
Yeah, well, it's just...
But we can't suffer the words to confuse the viewer.
Yeah, I understand.
Do you believe that the judges violated their oath of office?
They're sworn to the Constitution. The Constitution has no word in it about marriage, and that's remarkable. If they're going to redefine a word that's not even in the Constitution, how is that not a violation of the 10th Amendment, which states clearly that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. There's no power given to the federal government, as Justice Kennedy in his own writing in 2013 in U.S. versus Windsor recognized. There is no power given to the federal government over marriage. That was left to the states. And today that's been taken, and a majority has dictated that to the states.
Okay, there's so many politicians right now who are saying that this is outside of the rule of law, that they went beyond their constitutional authority. So we hear all these words, but then if that is the case, is this an impeachable offense?
Well, 4 justices on the Supreme Court, that being Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and Justice Alito, all said that about the opinion.
Right, that this is basically a lawless...
It was completely outside the Constitution.
Well, friend, I'm going to continue tomorrow and the next day with 3 segments of this nearly hour-long interview. 2 quick things. Number 1, don't take the bait. There are people who want to discuss so-called homosexual marriage in a godless framework. A good man, Tony Perkins, recently did an op-ed piece in USA Today, and he made a fatal mistake. He never mentioned God. He never mentioned the church. He never mentioned Jesus Christ. He never mentioned the scriptures. He never mentioned the 10 Commandments, the laws of God. Nothing. It was a godless argument. It was about money, education, stability. It misses the point. If all of those things were equal with regular marriage, then what? It's still an affront to God. It's still a sin against heaven. Please, if you enjoy the show, here's the other thing. Help us financially. We exist completely because of your gifts. And if you want to see the entire interview without break, you can go to our website. It's right there on the screen. Hope that you'll join us tomorrow night in this exclusive interview with Judge Roy Moore.